Hello, I'm Craig, and welcome to another episode of Football Kit Memories, the football podcast that gets under the shirt. In today's episode, I'm joined by football writer and editor of the Set Pieces, Chris Evans. In our chat, I find out what it's like to be a football writer, combining freelance work, feature articles, and book writing. Chris also talks more about the Set Pieces website, which was relaunched in 2020 during the pandemic, and expands on its plans for growth in 2021 and beyond. Later, and as always, I asked Chris to pick out 3 of his favourite football shirts and tell me a little bit more about what they mean to him. Remember, you can listen to this and other episodes of Football Kit Memories on all major audio platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Please do like, follow, share, but above all, please do enjoy the podcast. Okay, so today on the podcast, I'm delighted to say I'm joined by a freelance journalist and editor of the Set Pieces. It's Chris Evans. How you doing, mate?
Yeah, not too bad. How are you?
Mate, all good, thanks. Great to have you here. So glad you've been able to make the time. Really excited to find out a bit more about the Set Pieces today too.
Great, absolutely.
So, Chris, I read that you studied sports journalism at university, but initially your career kind of took you in a different direction, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, so I first of all, I did quite a bit of freelance stuff when I first graduated, or freelance in the sense that I used to go and report on Stratford Town for £30 a match. I used to follow them home and away, and I did a few bits of the Press Association. But yeah, that was always looking for a real job, I guess.
Right.
And that while I did a lot of writing, it took me to kind of like a content agency rather than doing anything football.
Okay, and is it kind of like it's a written job as well in your agency world too then?
It is, yeah. So it's like magazines, websites, and the like. Basically, any project that needs some words for it, but it's more kind of editorial and it's feature writing rather than copywriting, for example. But
Right.
yeah, so the skills are the same basically.
So you were freelancing for a long time, and then you took the leap to kind of do like a half and half thing. So you're doing football writing part-time, and then you're also part-time in your agency work as well. What did it take you to make that leap? Was that quite a daunting thing for you to do?
I mean, it was and it wasn't. So I always knew that I wanted to make more time for it, but it was always tricky to decide when that tipping point would be. So I'd regularly done features primarily for 442 because that's the magazine I've always read, I've always loved, and it was always probably suited my style a little bit more as a feature writer than kind of like some of the newsy things.
Okay.
I then decided that actually if I was going to make the jump, I needed to find more time. So I actually moved to another agency and people that I knew and spoke to them, and we came to a deal that kind of worked, and it meant that the risk was much lower than if I'd simply just like cut days somewhere else, for example. And then during that time, I filtered that down and down again based on what I've done.
Right. So what kind of publications are you freelancing for then? You mentioned 442.
So 442 is the main one that I do things with, which kind of accounts for the lower Twitter following that I have, because one, it's great working in print and I love getting it through the door. I mean, people online don't see it, and I probably see quite on there too. But yeah, I do. I mean, I've done bits and pieces for quite a few of the national newspapers, but the Independent I did something over the summer with. The Guardian obviously put some stuff out too. So it really depends on where the stories are. But as I say, 442 is the main area that I do something with.
Right, okay. And you mentioned that a lot of the stuff you do is kind of feature-led. I read that you said that one of your strengths is actually finding out the kind of niche short, like maybe less obvious, kind of more quirky stories in order to kind of put yourself out there a bit more and give you something a bit, show a bit of difference in the market.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think this actually helps going through the agency world a little bit, because you would work on different magazines or newspapers in particular that were for very specific audiences. So I did something for a data management company before, and you're thinking, how am I going to make a bi-monthly 16-page newspaper interesting when it's just boxes of files? But actually, if you knew where to look, you could find stories.
Okay.
And because you get used to having to find gems out of pretty much nothing.
Yeah.
You go to something that has got such wider appeal like football, and actually, yes, there's the big stories that are great, and I love watching the Premier League and all of that myself anyway, but actually you go further down, especially in this country because of like non-league, there were some absolutely brilliant stories that no one would touch and no one would see necessarily. And you could just dig them out, and sometimes your nose kind of makes you follow something, and you realize you've got an incredible story.
Nice. So aside from the kind of feature stuff as well, I read that you've interviewed some quite big names in football as well. So, I mean, just to reel a few off, I've got Geoff Hurst, Jamie Carragher, Rio Ferdinand, Luis Felipe Scolari. What kind of time do you get with these guys as a journalist who's giving them an interview? Is it often kind of rushed, or do you actually get a bit of time to get to know them, have a coffee with them, and understand a bit more about what they're about?
It depends on what the project is, and what it's for. Normally, you find that if you've approached somebody for an interview and they like the sound of what you're trying to do, they will give you quite a bit of time. Like they'll happily sit there and chat with you, whether it be on the phone, whether it's video call, whether it's in person, but they will normally chat with you because, essentially these guys, they love football like everyone else. And it just so happens that they're really good at it, and people just know them. They're just normal people, really. So they love chatting about it and talking about their experiences and their memories, particularly the older guys. I mean, you do get some, obviously with some will come through sponsorship deals, and you'll have set times, and you're doing like 10, 15 minutes with them. And that's obviously a lot more quick fire. But also, I mean, the way that they answer is a lot different as well, because they realize you need to get a lot from it, and they're used to that. So they'll give you quick answers, whereas some of the other ones will give you a big long feature answer. Interesting.
So much depends on kind of the route in, I guess, and what they're trying to promote too.
Yeah. And look, I mean, people love talking about things that they've done. And if they think that you're taking a different angle, or if your approach is talking about a different detail that they haven't done, then that's great. I mean, you also get some people, I remember really stood out kind of interviewing Scolari. 2 or 3 times he thanked me for my time, and he thanked me for doing something with him. Wow. And I was asking him about why he'd lost 7-1 to Germany. And he was thanking me, and I thought, this is incredible. Like, it definitely should be the other way around. But it all comes down to the individual. Some people are great, some people aren't, I guess. So and you won't normally be interviewing the people that aren't. So.
Yeah, and people get good days and bad days as well, right? So you might catch someone on a bad day, and the next day they might be a lot more polite, a lot more considerate. So, yeah, fair enough, mate. I was going to ask you as well. So you've written a book, and you're in the process of writing a second book at the moment. I wanted to know, for you as a football writer, in terms of like the approach you take to writing an article, especially the feature articles you write, as compared to a book, what the differences might be for you.
I mean, I find when I'm writing a feature, if I know what the word count is in advance, without thinking, I can end up more or less within that ballpark. Right. I know a lot of people I speak to who also do things, or will, write for the set pieces, will say, they've gone well over the word count. It's just not, somehow my brain doesn't do that. So having that number, it kind of feels its way through, if that makes sense. That sounds really... Well, it might sound a bit wanky, but
it's like riding the bike, I guess, isn't it? You've kind of done it so many times, and that's your bread and butter, isn't it? Writing those articles, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, and you just find a rhythm with it. With a book, it's a little bit different because you're very conscious that you've got more space, and particularly the first one that I wrote, I think you feel that means that you should write with a little bit more filler, and you're probably a bit more florid, and I think that's actually something that you've got to get over. And I think actually the first one was very niche. It was a very small one with about Loughborough University Football Club, which is a good story. But in hindsight, I mean, I did a feature on that 4-4-4-2 as well, and actually the feature was a lot better than the book probably was, because it forced me to be quite succinct. So you go on to the second one. I think you actually, because you've done the first book, you learn from those mistakes, and it's almost going out there and having done that the first time actually teaches you what you should be doing the second time, because you've had a chance to look at it and review. I mean, I guess it depends on the sort of person you are, but I look back and I'm quite critical of myself. So I always look at what I've what I think I've done well, what I don't think I've done well. So
Right.
yeah.
All a process, I guess. So, Chris, do you want to tell me a bit more about the set pieces? So, you're the editor of the website.
Yes, yeah. So the set pieces obviously has quite a vaunted history in the fact that everyone knows that it used to be Ian McIntosh at the helm, and he was obviously a championship manager legend. I mean, boy, if you haven't seen what he did at Goodison Park, you should go there. Stands closing around him. He was brilliant on there, and I think that was the basis of what the set pieces was. Obviously, Ian moved off and did other things, and essentially we've now got the site was quiet for a bit, but we decided, I'd always written for them, but we decided we wanted to relaunch it, and well done to us. We decided that we're going to relaunch it April 2020. So we've done all this work and then relaunched it right at the start of the COVID pandemic. So that wasn't great, but we've always tried to keep to those same basis of what made the set pieces popular before. I mean, we've done a couple of really nice Football Manager projects before and tried to do it in a quirky way. So rather than just replaying a season like everyone does now, we tried to do something and work with Football Manager to do. It was a fans vote. So the fans voted and made the decision, was what we did with one of them. Another, we got coaches during that first lockdown. We got some professional coaches to come together, and we did like a draft game to see who would win. And I took part as well and wasn't very good. So that's been really good, and we try to make sure that we do that. I mean, we're now looking at different niches. Obviously, the world has changed an awful lot since Ian started it. So we've recently launched like an indie podcast network. So looking at some of the indie podcasts that are out there and the brilliant work that people are doing, like yourself, and we want to try to give that a bit more of a voice and use our audience to amplify that. So that's something we're looking at now. We're right at the start of that. So we've got a band of 12 as we speak today, podcasts. We want to grow that a little bit further. We want to get more people kind of engaging with that, and hopefully that's good for everyone. You know, if people come to us to find a podcast that's a little bit different to kind of like the big ones, then that's great, and hopefully they'll find some others too.
Nice. So Chris, in your role there as editor, are you commissioning articles as well? It's very much kind of like a feature-led thing, isn't it, and project-led thing rather than news stuff.
Yeah. So it's always feature-wise. I mean, we can't compete news-wise with stuff. I mean, we're not going to get the clicks. We're never going to be able to do that as well as the big guys. So we don't even try to compete with that. We do look at features, so that we look at quality over quantity. So we'll be looking at what stories do you think people will really want to read, what's really interesting and not somewhere else. That means we're not necessarily chasing hits all the time. We're chasing what's going to be interesting. We want to have that sort of subsection of the football fraternity, I guess. And I think that does work. I mean, this is what leads into doing indie podcasts in that sense, because again, that's normally working in niches, and we feel that football's such a big beast that actually niches is an area where there's some ground to be made up.
Nice, interesting, mate. So where can people find it? Setpieces.com?
Setpieces.com.
Yeah, and you're on Twitter, Instagram?
Twitter's the best one to go to. We are on Instagram. We do some great stuff on Instagram, but we do rely on the designer for that, which is quite tricky because it takes us some time to put together what she has. But it's worth having a look over on the Set Pieces Instagram because there's some really nice stuff that we've done over there.
Coming up after the break, Chris shares his football kit memories. See you in a bit. Chris, let's talk about some football shirts.
Let's do it.
So look, on every podcast, I ask everybody the same question. What do football shirts mean to you? I don't think, I'm probably on the wrong podcast to say this, but I don't think I have a clear affinity in terms of the style of certain football shirts. I've always been fascinated by the teams. The colours are something that really that jumps out, but it's not really a sort of a style thing.
I mean, maybe it's just because none of my, my team that I follow have never really had an amazing, shirt.
Right.
So perhaps that's where it comes from. That if I was a fan of a big club and they'd done something really nice, then maybe I'd be more into it. But as a non-league fan, maybe that's why I've not got that same affinity. But it's more what the teams that wear the shirt mean to me and the players and stuff like that. And I think when I was thinking for this podcast for which ones to pick, it was more about what it made me feel and think and remember rather than perhaps like a style thing.
Yeah, well, mate, that's very much what the podcast is all about. So you picked out 3 really interesting ones to talk about. We're going to talk about a popular one. It's England's home shirt by Umbro for Euro 96. Tell me more.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a bit of an obvious one. I think a lot of people would pick it, but it was just, I think it was that tournament and that England team that made me really fall in love with football. I mean, 1996, I must have been 8 years old. And I think I just started to get into football a little bit. I remember trying to watch the 1996 FA Cup final with my dad on TV. And I mean, if anyone remembers that, it wasn't a great final between Man United and Liverpool.
Right.
And I think I went out and played in the garden for a little bit. And my dad called me in after Cantona scored. So that, I was into it, but it was struggling to grab me. But during the Euros, that was the time. That I remember I sat and watched 90-minute games. And, one of the big memories is being at my granddad's house and watching Paul Ince get fouled, I think against the Netherlands. And I remember he got up and he was getting hugged by his teammates. And I said, well, why is he getting hugged? He's just been fouled. Surely that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
And they were like, we just won a penalty. And I couldn't get my head around it. And it's always stuck with me that I just didn't get it. But during that few weeks, it just grabbed me, and I remember I had to go to bed before, during extra time in the semi-final. I mean, and then I remember, because I was still awake upstairs, I remember my dad came and fetched me, which I really thank him for now, to sit and watch the penalties and Germany to win. But I think, I mean, actually, by losing in that way, I think it was like the perfect grounding. If this was my way into football, to go through it with kind of like heroic failure probably set me up quite nicely.
Yeah.
By 98 I was in. I was completely sold, and everything was about football by then.
Nice. No more playing in the garden during the games.
Oh no.
So look, we're gonna travel forward a bit more further in time for this one. But it's a bit more niche, this one. So this is Nuneaton Borough's FA Cup shirt from 2006. It's Edea is the manufacturer. Tell me about this one, mate.
I'm an Nuneaton Borough fan, although I don't have so much of an affinity with them anymore. I don't. I still support them. I still follow them, but I don't follow them home and away and support them in the same way. Okay. Partly because of my job, but also because of what's gone on at the club over previous years. So you can see articles like that I have written in the past.
Okay.
Pieces. So that's a good one to have a look at. But back then I was a teenager, and at 17, 18 years age, there was a few of us that kind of went home and away to all sorts of places. Like I went to Gainsborough about 4 years. Wow. And I don't think anyone would ever go to Gainsborough otherwise. I went to watch games there. I used to love it. And it was just this idea of traveling to somewhere that was different. You could get served when you're a teenager at some of these outposts. And it was brilliant. The FA Cup run then came just at the right sort of time for that. And we'd had a little run when I was back at school, played Stoke City and beaten them.
Okay.
But we'd never really been that much of a cup team in my time following them, aside from that run. Right. And this just took off. So eventually this shirt that we've got was the one, it was only worn twice. Oh, right. And that was against Middlesbrough in the in the third round. And we drew 1-1 at home. Wow. And then we went up to Middlesbrough and lost 5-2 there. And it was a special Virgin Money shirt that I think was sorted out, sponsored by Virgin Money, and it was a special edition for that. So a bit of a collector's item, but not probably for many people outside of Nuneaton, I wouldn't have thought. But yeah, it was great, and I think the whole run and that shirt reminds me of that run. And I mean, we scored about 4 goals during that run from the early qualifying rounds that we scored in last minute. Equalisers, winners. Histon in the second round, they absolutely battered us. Then we went up the other end and scored a header, and we won in like the 93rd minute or something. And they printed scarves, Histon versus Middlesbrough scarves. Well, useless. I mean, they had their moment against Leeds, didn't they, a few years later? But yeah, I mean, if there's any way that you like to see winning and beating a team, is when they've already printed the team they're going to face in the third round and then they lose. But it was just brilliant. I mean, it was just everything about it. Going to these places. I remember going away to Tiverton the day after my 18th birthday, and I went on the bus all the way down to Devon. Wow. And it wasn't great. Like, I just sat on these bus seats. I had a double seat, and my mates were around there. I was like, I'm just going to have a double seat and just try to sleep on this round. But it was great. I went to every game on that run. And being at college, it was good because I could be kind of flexible and make sure I get to these away replays, because we kept on drawing and have to go away to these places.
Yeah.
And it's just, I mean, it's everything that a football fan's about, really, because you've got that excitement. You've got this moment where you were kind of like on TV when we got the late equaliser against Middlesbrough. Gareth Southgate handballed it, and
wow.
You know, we should have beaten them that day. And I remember going up to Middlesbrough, and we all stopped off. All the club coaches had to stop off at Thirsk, and I was convinced that we were gonna win at the Riverside. And I think we held on for about half an hour before we conceded, and then conceded 5. But I remember it, and just I was convinced because of what I'd seen. I think Middlesbrough had lost 7-0, 7-1 or something like that to Arsenal, like on the Saturday. And I thought, this is it. We can do this. And I mean, it didn't happen in the end, but the fact that I'd convinced myself that a 6th tier team could go and win at a club. I mean, Steve McLaren went off to be England manager after that season, and they went to the UEFA Cup final, and I'd convinced myself that we were going to win.
Wow!
And it was just, it was brilliant. And what made it better as well was a friend's coach that they were on broke down on the way back. So they were stuck on the motorway, and we were all just waving as we went past.
The magic of the cup, mate. Very nice. Very nice. Okay, so Chris, your final choice is the Manchester United 98-2000 home shirt by Umbro. I think this one was worn specifically in the league, wasn't it? So they had a different one for the Champions League, I gather, during this period.
I think so, yes. Yeah. So, I mean, the first two were really obvious choices for me because of what they meant to me. But I think this shirt, I don't know, I was trying to think, well, what would I pick? Do I pick something a little bit different? And this one always jumped out. I mean, if I look back on that era for a kit, that jumps out. And maybe it's because Man United were the team at that time, and obviously they win the Champions League. But I just remember that late 90s that I'm sure they marketed it as something like the kit with the zip.
Yeah.
And because it got a little zip on the top, and it got like a little leather thing and a bit of, I don't know, some soft fluff or something at the back of it to make it comfortable. And you kind of think about Roy Keane wearing that now. But you look back now in 2021 and you think they were marketing a zip as a reason to buy a football shirt. I mean, that's a reason to pick it in itself, I think. I mean, I know it's probably the time of like Diodora poppers and stuff like that. So I don't know whether just like finding a way to take things off was like a really, really big thing back then.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just leaps out to me as something perhaps a little bit different, and that's something that just kind of yells that 90s era. And again, those Premier League boom years, I guess, when I really, really fell in love with football, and has probably led me to where I am today, I'd imagine, in a sense. And it's that kit that kind of always makes me think of that time, I think.
Yeah, mate, very nice. It's an interesting shirt. I think, someone will probably correct me after we put the podcast out, but I think that's quite a unique design. I don't know if that was templated elsewhere, and it was kind of like Umbro didn't do the Umbro diamonds down the sleeve for a long time, I don't think. So that was just something very unique in the zip as well. So you're right, it's something that definitely stands out from the era, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, I think so. And I mean, all those players that played in it, I mean, they were, I always think if I look back at that time, I would think of someone like, Jaap Stam or David Beckham or something like that. And I think these are just people who, I guess, of my age, they were the players who you grew up with. And I know they always say it's how kind of sort of like first cut is the one that kind of stays with you. But that era was my era, I guess. And that's what as a kid, these guys were like the biggest and best players in the world. And actually still look back, they genuinely were. And I think that's why that kit kind of jumped to my mind.
No, mate, fantastic. I like those choices very much. So, look, Chris, thanks so much for sharing your football kit memories with me. Where can people find you on Twitter?
So I'm at Chris Evans Wright. So Wright as in WRITE. Yeah, I'm on there, and obviously Set Piece as well at the Set Pieces on Twitter as well. It's worth a go to see what we're up to.
Fantastic, mate. Well, look, absolutely brilliant to talk to you. Thanks a lot, mate.
Nice one, no worries. Thanks for having me on.
So there you have it. Massive thanks to Chris for sharing his football kit memories with me. Remember, you can follow me, my own collection on Instagram, or get in touch on Twitter or email. Make sure you follow Chris and check out the Set Pieces too. The music you heard was produced by Evil Ed. You can check out his music on his Bandcamp page. There's links to absolutely everything there I've mentioned in the notes section. And finally, thanks to you for listening. If you have enjoyed it, please do spread the word, give me a follow on social, and subscribe to Football Kit Memories on your podcast player of choice. Sharing is caring. And other than that, I guess that's it. Until next time, I'll see you later.